Forget the Renaissance for a moment. Long before the libraries of Florence or the universities of Paris became centers of learning, another city had already become the intellectual heartbeat of the world. Around the year 800 AD, while much of Europe struggled with political fragmentation and limited access to classical knowledge, a magnificent city stood at the center of a global intellectual revolution. That city was Baghdad. In the heart of the Abbasid Caliphate, Baghdad had become one of the most important centers of science, philosophy, and culture in human history. Scholars gathered here to study mathematics from India, philosophy from Greece, astronomy from Persia, and medical knowledge from many civilizations. Books moved through the city like precious cargo, and ink was valued almost as much as gold. At the center of this extraordinary intellectual world stood a place that would shape the future of science and scholarship, the House of Wisdom. But Baghdad was not only a city of scholars. It was a living metropolis filled with merchants, engineers, poets, travelers, and craftsmen from across 3 continents. To understand how this remarkable city became the intellectual capital of the world, we must first step into its streets. In the early morning, the sun rises above the Tigris River and illuminates the walls of a city unlike any other in the medieval world. Baghdad had not grown gradually over centuries like most ancient cities. Instead, it was carefully planned from the beginning. In the year 762 AD, the Abbasid Caliph al-Mansur ordered the construction of an entirely new capital. The design was revolutionary. A perfect circle nearly 2 kilometers wide, massive defensive walls surrounded the city, giving rise to the name the Round City. 4 monumental gates opened toward the major regions of the empire. The Khorasan Gate faced Persia and Central Asia. The Basra Gate connected Baghdad to the Persian Gulf and the Indian Ocean trade routes. The Kufa Gate opened toward Arabia. The Syria Gate pointed west toward the Mediterranean world. Broad roads extended from these gates toward the center of the city, where the Caliph's palace and the Great Mosque stood as symbols of imperial power. By the year 800 AD, Baghdad had grown into one of the largest cities on earth. Historians estimate that its population may have exceeded 1 million residents. This made Baghdad larger than London, Paris, or Rome at the time. Its streets were filled with people speaking many languages: Arabic, Persian, Greek, Syriac, Hebrew, and languages carried by traders from India and Central Asia. Baghdad was not simply an Islamic city. It was a global crossroads where cultures met and exchanged ideas. As the morning progresses, the markets begin to fill with life. Merchants open wooden stalls while caravans enter through the great gates. Camels carry silk from China, spices from India, ivory from Africa, and precious metals from distant lands. The smell of cinnamon, pepper, and saffron fills the air. These goods have traveled thousands of kilometers before arriving in the capital of the Abbasid world. Baghdad's markets were among the busiest commercial centers of the medieval era. Streets were lined with stalls selling textiles, metalwork, pottery, glassware, perfumes, and jewelry. Scholars browsed shops that sold writing materials and manuscripts. Merchants from Persia negotiated prices beside Jewish traders exchanging silver coins. Indian sailors unloaded cargo from riverboats along the Tigris. Everywhere, the sounds of bargaining and conversation echoed through the streets. The Tigris River itself served as the lifeline of the city. Boats carried grain, textiles, ceramics, and other goods along its waters. Ships arriving from Basra connected Baghdad to the vast maritime trade network of the Indian Ocean. Dock workers unloaded cargo while merchants recorded transactions and officials collected taxes on imported goods. The river connected Baghdad with distant regions of the empire, ensuring a constant flow of commerce. This immense wealth was made possible by the Abbasid Caliphate, which ruled one of the largest empires of the medieval world. Its territories stretched from the mountains of Central Asia to the deserts of North Africa and from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean Sea. Millions of people lived under Abbasid rule. Taxes from agriculture, trade, and industry flowed into Baghdad, filling the caliph's treasury with gold dinars and silver dirhams. Unlike many rulers who focused solely on military expansion, the Abbasid caliphs believed that knowledge strengthened their empire. They invested heavily in learning. Scholars received salaries from the state, translation projects were funded, and libraries were expanded. Education became an important feature of Abbasid culture. One of the most important developments during this period was the spread of paper. The technology had originally come from China and reached the Islamic world after the Battle of Talas in 751 AD. Soon, paper mills appeared across the Abbasid territories, and Baghdad became one of the first major centers of paper production outside China. Paper was far cheaper and easier to produce than parchment, which meant books could be copied and distributed more widely. Libraries expanded rapidly, and scholars could exchange ideas more easily than ever before. This environment of intellectual curiosity led to the establishment of one of the most remarkable institutions of the medieval world, the House of Wisdom, known in Arabic as Bait al-Hikmah. The House of Wisdom functioned as a library, translation center, and research academy. Within its halls, scholars gathered manuscripts from many civilizations and worked to translate them into Arabic. Greek philosophical works by Aristotle and Plato were studied carefully. Medical writings by Hippocrates and Galen were translated and expanded. Indian mathematical texts introduced the decimal number system and the concept of zero. Persian scientific traditions contributed to astronomy and administration. In Baghdad, knowledge from different civilizations was brought together and transformed. Scholars did not simply preserve ancient knowledge, they improved it. Mathematicians explored new numerical systems and solved complex equations. Astronomers observed the movements of stars and planets using instruments such as the astrolabe. Physicians studied anatomy and developed treatments in some of the earliest hospitals in the medieval world. One of the most influential scholars of this era was Muhammad ibn Musa al-Khwarizmi. Working in Baghdad during the early 9th century, he wrote groundbreaking works on mathematics. His book on calculation introduced systematic methods for solving equations, a discipline that became known as algebra, the origin of the modern word algebra. The term algorithm, used today in computer science, also derives from the Latin form of his name. Astronomy also flourished during the Abbasid Golden Age. Scholars carefully observed the stars and planets, refining earlier Greek models of the universe. Observatories were established to measure celestial movements with increasing accuracy. These studies helped improve calendars, navigation, and timekeeping, all of which were essential for travelers and merchants crossing deserts and seas. Medicine advanced significantly as well. Hospitals in Baghdad served not only as places of treatment, but also as centers of education. Medical students studied under experienced physicians, learning diagnosis, treatment methods, and surgical techniques. Patients were treated regardless of wealth, reflecting the Abbasid commitment to public health. By the early 9th century, Baghdad had become the intellectual center of the world. Students traveled from across the Islamic world to study in its libraries and academies. Philosophers debated the nature of logic and ethics. Scientists experimented with mathematics and astronomy. Knowledge flowed through the city, just as trade goods moved through its markets. As evening falls over Baghdad, lanterns begin to glow along the streets and bridges of the Tigris. The markets gradually quiet, but the pursuit of knowledge continues. Inside homes and libraries, scholars copy manuscripts by candlelight. Astronomers climb rooftops to observe the night sky, recording the movement of stars and planets. Over time, the knowledge developed in Baghdad spread far beyond the Abbasid Empire. Scholars carried manuscripts westward to North Africa and Spain. In cities such as Córdoba and Toledo, Arabic texts were translated into Latin. Through these translations, European scholars rediscovered classical philosophy, mathematics, and medicine. Centuries later, this knowledge helped ignite the European Renaissance. Algebra, advanced astronomy, and medical knowledge all played key roles in shaping the scientific developments of the modern world. The intellectual achievements of Baghdad quietly influenced the future of civilization. Yet history also reminds us that great cities are fragile. In the year 1258, more than 4 centuries after Baghdad's Golden Age began, Mongol armies led by Hulagu Khan invaded the city. The destruction that followed was devastating. Libraries were burned, scholars were killed, and the House of Wisdom itself disappeared. Despite this tragedy, the knowledge created in Baghdad had already spread across continents. The ideas developed there continued to influence science, mathematics, and philosophy for generations. Today, historians recognize the Abbasid Golden Age as one of the most important periods in the development of human knowledge. The scholars of Baghdad preserved ancient wisdom that might otherwise have been lost, and they expanded it with new discoveries that shaped the future of science. For a time, Baghdad stood as the intellectual heartbeat of the world, a city where merchants traded silk and spices, where scholars translated ancient texts, and where mathematicians developed ideas that still shape our understanding of the universe. If you had walked through Baghdad in the year 800 AD, you would not simply have been visiting a great city. You would have been standing in the center of humanity's greatest laboratory of ideas, a place where civilizations met. Knowledge flowed freely across cultures, and the pursuit of learning shaped the foundations of the modern world. And for one brilliant moment in history, Baghdad was the home of that knowledge.